No one knew exactly how it started. The first reports came in from the edges of northern Montana, small towns, isolated communities where communication often lagged behind the rest of the country. A few missing persons. Then entire households. Within 72 hours, the power grid in 5 counties failed without warning. Roads were blocked, phones were silent, and those who tried to leave never arrived. Miles away in eastern Wyoming, 34-year-old Caleb Morgan hadn't heard a thing. A former Army mechanic turned ranch hand, Caleb lived a quiet life on the outskirts of Coldridge, a town barely big enough to warrant a traffic light. His only companions were his aging dog, Tank, and the stubborn radio that picked up more static than music. He liked it that way, until that Monday morning. It began with the sound of scratching. Not from the door, but the windows. Soft, deliberate, and strangely rhythmic. Tank growled low in his throat, ears pinned back, body rigid. Caleb moved cautiously, heart thudding, his old service pistol already in hand. When he peeled back the curtain, his breath caught. A man stood there, gaunt and pale, eyes hollow, skin stretched tight across his bones. His lips were cracked, flecks of dried blood at the corners. But what chilled Caleb to his core wasn't the man's appearance, it was his silence. The figure didn't moan, didn't speak, didn't scream. He just stared, jaw slack, tapping on the glass with dirt-caked fingernails. Then Caleb saw more shapes behind him. 3. No, 5. Maybe more. Coldridge was 30 miles from the next town and even further from a hospital. In times of emergency, they relied on the sheriff's station, a 2-room building manned by 3 deputies and an old retired Marine named Deputy Miles Rooker. Caleb didn't wait. He loaded his truck, grabbed a battered walkie from his Army days, and whistled for Tank. "Something's wrong," he muttered, flooring the gas down the dirt trail that led into town. The streets of Coldridge were eerily still. Shops sat closed though it was past 9 a.m. A pickup truck idled on Main Street, doors open, engine humming, but no one inside. A half-eaten sandwich sat on the dashboard. Caleb parked outside Miller's grocery and pushed the door open. The bell jingled. No one answered. Broken jars littered the floor. Cartons of milk were smashed near the back exit. Behind the counter, the store owner, Marla Jenkins, lay still. For a split second, Caleb thought she might be asleep. Then she moved. He froze. Marla's head twisted at an unnatural angle, one eye filmed over, the other wide and twitching. Her teeth snapped together with a sickening click as she clawed her way toward him, dragging a leg that bent the wrong way. Tank barked furiously, but Caleb didn't flinch. He'd seen war. He'd seen death. But he had never seen something dead that still moved. He backed out, slammed the door, and peeled away just as the glass behind him shattered. He had to warn the town. At the sheriff's office, Deputy Rooker was already barricading the front door with a vending machine. 2 other residents, June Foster, a retired nurse, and Eddie Trammell, the teenage son of the local diner's cook, were helping him. "They're not human," Rooker said bluntly when Caleb asked what was going on. "They don't talk. Don't feel pain. Headshots drop, but that's about it." "How many?" "Too many," Rooker growled. "And they're spreading." Over the next 6 hours, more survivors trickled in. Lena Hart, a single mother who'd fought off one of the creatures with a garden hoe, Bobby Clay, a trucker who'd seen the highway barricades overturned and burning. The sheriff's office became a makeshift stronghold, the town's last sliver of order in a world beginning to fall apart. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon. That's when the real horror began. From the shadows came the shapes. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Silent as smoke, pale faces catching the last of the dying light. Caleb stood at the window, shotgun in hand, tank at his side, eyes wide but steady. "They're waiting," Lena whispered behind him. "Why are they just standing there?" "They know we're inside," Caleb muttered. "Then why aren't they attacking?" Deputy Rooker answered grimly, his eyes locked on the growing horde, "Because they're not done gathering." A long silence fell. Then, without warning, the creatures began to scream. It was the sound of thousands of broken voices crying out at once, jagged, unnatural, and impossibly loud. Caleb's blood ran cold. This wasn't an outbreak. This was a siege. And Coldridge had just become the front line of the Great Undead Crisis. The windows shattered just after midnight. A brick, launched with unnatural force, crashed through the front of the sheriff's office, trailing shards of glass and a gust of freezing air. Then came the silence again, long, unbearable silence. Caleb Morgan gripped his shotgun, heart thudding, sweat beading across his forehead despite the October chill. The others were scattered throughout the station, Deputy Rooker reinforcing the back door, Lena Hart and Eddie Trammell barricading the hallway with filing cabinets, and June Foster tending to Bobby Clay's injured leg using duct tape, gauze, and stubborn determination. But all their efforts felt like paper walls against a hurricane. The moment the undead shriek had echoed across Coldridge, they all knew the rules of the world had changed. Caleb inched toward the window, careful not to step on the glass crunching under his boots. Outside, under the flickering streetlight, stood dozens, no, more now, bodies swaying gently, like they were listening. One of them was wearing a Coldridge High football jersey, or what was left of it, stretched over a rotted frame and stained dark with something Caleb didn't want to identify. "They're organizing," Deputy Rooker muttered as he returned from the back hallway, carrying a duffel bag full of old service pistols and a hunting rifle. "They never did that before." "What do you mean before?" Caleb asked. Rooker hesitated. "This isn't the first town," he said quietly. "The feds have been tracking this since June. A mining site in Utah got overrun. Nobody talked about it. Then a freight train went off the grid 2 weeks ago, carrying quarantine materials, biological waste. They hushed that up too. I heard it over my old police band radio before it cut out." Caleb stared at him. "And you're telling us now?" "Wasn't sure it was true until tonight," Rooker snapped. "But it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is staying alive." Before anyone could reply, Tank growled. Low. Furious. Every hair on the dog's back stood on end as he moved toward the hallway where Eddie had gone moments ago. Caleb followed instantly, senses on full alert. "Eddie," he called, voice tense. No answer. They turned the corner and froze. The barricade had been breached. The overturned filing cabinet had been shoved aside with inhuman strength. And standing in the middle of the hallway was Eddie, wide-eyed, shaking, his shirt drenched in blood that was not his own. It came through the ceiling," he stammered. "It was in the vents. Dropped on me. I stabbed it with a screwdriver but, June's in the room at the end." Caleb and Rooker didn't wait. They sprinted past Eddie, kicking open the door to the infirmary room where June had been treating Bobby. Inside was chaos, blood smeared across the wall, a toppled medical cart, and June struggling beneath a pale, worry creature gnawing at her shoulder. Bobby lay on the floor, unconscious or worse. Rooker didn't hesitate. He raised the hunting rifle and fired. The bullet struck the creature in the temple, flinging it sideways with a wet crack. June let out a ragged gasp, blood pouring from her arm. Get her out! Caleb shouted. He and Rooker dragged her into the hallway as Lena appeared, face pale, cradling a bat in her hands. Tank followed, barking frantically as more thudding noises echoed through the ceiling vents. They're trying to get in from above now, Caleb said. They're learning fast. This building won't hold, Lena muttered. We need to fall back somewhere defensible. High ground. Steel doors. Reinforced structure. Caleb nodded grimly. The fire station, he said. 3 blocks south. Built during the Cold War. Steel shutters, underground fuel, backup generator. It's our best shot. How do we get there? Eddie asked. They're all outside. We go loud, Rooker said. We give them something to chase. 10 minutes later, 2 stolen trucks barreled down Coldridge's main road, headlights off, engines roaring, drawing the horde toward the old train depot at the north end of town. Meanwhile, under the cover of smoke and darkness, Caleb, Rooker, Lena, June, and Eddie crept through alleys and abandoned yards, carrying what little gear they could manage. It took them 23 breathless minutes to reach the fire station, and just as Caleb opened the side door, Eddie cried out. One of the infected had followed them. A silent runner, fast and lean, sprang from the shadows, tackling the boy to the ground. Caleb spun, shotgun raised, but hesitated. One wrong move could hit Eddie. It was June, despite her bleeding arm, who lunged forward and drove a crowbar through the creature's skull. Eddie gasped, alive, trembling, as Caleb pulled him up. That's twice I've saved your hide tonight, June said, grimacing through the pain. You're buying me a drink if we survive this. They slammed the fire station doors shut just as the shrieking returned, closer now, angrier. Outside, the town of Coldridge burned. Inside, 12 survivors huddled in silence, knowing this was only the beginning. The fire station doors groaned as something heavy slammed against them, once, then again, testing the metal, searching for weakness. Inside, the 12 survivors sat or stood in tense silence, their shadows flickering in the emergency lights that buzzed overhead. Caleb Morgan paced near the main bay, jaw clenched, listening for patterns in the pounding. It wasn't random. The undead were working together, pressing in waves, backing off, trying again. Like they were thinking. Deputy Rooker checked the firehouse's steel shutters. These'll hold for a while, he muttered, but they'll find a way eventually. They always do. They shouldn't be able to think like that, Lena Hart said from across the room, hands wrapped around a mug of instant coffee. Zombies don't strategize. They don't lay traps. They don't stalk people through alleys. Until now, Rooker replied grimly. Bobby Clay stirred from the corner where he'd been resting, his leg wrapped in makeshift bandages. Maybe this ain't zombies. Maybe it's something worse. A sharp silence followed. No one wanted to ask what worse could be. Eddie Trammell sat near June, still shaken from the alley attack. He hadn't said much since they arrived. His hoodie was stained with blood, some his own, most not. We need to call for help, he finally said. National Guard, FEMA, someone. We tried that, Lena said. No signals. Every band is static. Caleb stepped forward, dropping a folded firehouse blueprint on the table. If we want to stay alive, we need more than luck and prayers. This place has supplies, diesel, and a water tank. But we need to secure the whole station. Lock down every room, clear every hallway. We hold this ground or we die. Rooker nodded. First sweep in 10 minutes. No one goes alone. The group split into pairs, Caleb with Lena, Rooker with June, Eddie with Bobby, though Bobby had to limp behind. They moved through the firehouse like soldiers clearing a battlefield. Most of the rooms were untouched. Some still had sleeping bags and gear from when the firehouse was converted into an emergency shelter after last year's floods. Others had signs of recent disturbance, drag marks on the tile, smears of blood, and, in one case, a shattered mirror with something scratched into the glass. They are not dead. Not really. Lena stared at the message, eyes narrowed. What does that even mean? Caleb didn't answer. In the equipment room, Rooker found an old battery-powered radio. He brought it back to the main bay, set it on the table, and tuned it slowly, carefully, hoping for any sign of life. The signal came through like a whisper. If you're hearing this, you are not alone. Quarantine zones are compromised, safe zones reduced to 5 locations, repeat, 5 confirmed outposts remain. Everyone froze, staring at the speaker as the voice repeated. It was a woman, calm, methodical, military-trained by the sound of it. Fort Garland, Colorado. Safe zone echo, coordinates. Static. Then silence. Rewind it. Eddie shouted. It's not a recording, Rooker said, fiddling with the dials. It was live. And now it's gone. Hope burned in the room like a sudden flare. A safe zone. A real one. We could make it, Lena said quickly. If we get a working vehicle. Stock up. Drive fast and stick to backroads. That's maybe a day's ride. You saw what the highways look like, Bobby reminded her. Burned out wrecks. Roadblocks. It's a graveyard. But it's a direction, June said. We can't just sit here waiting to get torn apart. Caleb looked around the room, at 12 tired faces, bruised and bloodied, but still standing. He saw Tank curled near the wall, ears twitching at every distant thud. He saw the quiet fear in Eddie's eyes, the weariness in June's, and the quiet rage building in Rooker like a fire waiting for fuel. We stay one more night, Caleb decided. We rest. Heal. Tomorrow at first light, we run. We go for Garland. But what if the signal's old? Eddie asked. What if it's already overrun? Then we keep moving, Caleb said. We keep surviving. That night, they posted watches in pairs. The others tried to sleep in the garage bay, curled up in bunk beds and corners, clutching weapons and whispered prayers. At 2:43 a.m., during Lena and Bobby's watch, the noise changed. The undead weren't banging anymore. They were digging. Outside, under the moonless sky, dozens of pale figures clawed at the earth around the firehouse, pulling at sewer grates and storm drains. They moved in near silence, eyes glowing faintly in the dark, as if guided by memory, or by something smarter. Inside, Tank suddenly stood and growled at the floor. From the storm drain beneath the firehouse came the first metallic clang. Caleb sat up, shotgun in hand. They're coming under, he said. The sound came again. Clang. Then a scrape, metal grinding against stone. Caleb Morgan was already halfway across the firehouse floor, shotgun in one hand, flashlight in the other, eyes locked on the storm drain cover at the center of the garage bay. Tank followed, tail stiff, teeth bared, growling deep and low. Around them, the others stirred, roused from their fragile sleep by the unnatural sounds coming from beneath their feet. It's the drainage tunnel, Rooker said, appearing beside Caleb with a crowbar and a pistol. Old maintenance shaft runs underneath the foundation. Never sealed properly after the last renovation. And you didn't think to mention this earlier? Lena snapped, gripping a crowbar of her own. Didn't think the dead would be smart enough to find it, he muttered. The floor vibrated gently now, barely perceptible, but it was there. A rumbling hum, like dozens of hands scraping along concrete, slowly working their way closer. We need to seal it, June said quickly. Concrete. Steel. Anything we've got. We don't have time, Caleb replied. If they're already under us, they could break through any second. Eddie's voice cracked from the stairwell. I found the hatch, he called. Old access point to the maintenance shaft. It's in the supply room. There's a ladder going straight down. Caleb turned to Rooker. We need to see how close they are. If they're in the shaft, we either collapse it or we're buried in here with them. I'll go, Rooker said. It's my station. I'm going too, Caleb added. Rooker didn't argue. With Lena covering them from the top of the stairs, the two men descended into the supply room, pried open the old hatch, and climbed down into the black. The air below was wet, thick with mildew, and unnaturally warm. The tunnel stretched for 30 feet, narrow and low-ceilinged, with water trickling along the edges. Caleb swept his flashlight slowly. Smell that? Rooker nodded grimly. Rot. Halfway down the tunnel, they found the first sign, a bloodied handprint smeared along the wall, 5 fingers, human, but too long. As they stepped closer, Caleb's light caught something farther down the shaft. Movement. Then, stillness. A shape crouched just outside the flashlight's range, pressed against the far wall. Its head tilted at a sharp, unnatural angle. Don't move, Caleb whispered. Too late. The figure lunged, mouth opening wide in a silent scream. Caleb fired once, catching it mid-leap, the shot echoing like a cannon in the tunnel. The creature crumpled at their feet, twitching, not dead. It writhed for several seconds before finally going still. Not like the others, Rooker muttered, shining his light on it. It's fresher. Faster. Caleb knelt to inspect it. This wasn't trying to break in. It was scouting. Rooker's face darkened. They're evolving. Back in the firehouse, panic was spreading. June and Lena were piling furniture over the storm drain cover. Eddie returned with wire mesh and a welding torch they'd found in the engine bay, while Bobby, limping and pale, stood watch near the back exit. When Caleb and Rooker re-emerged, they wasted no time. We block off the tunnel, Caleb said. Tonight. Weld the hatch. Pour fuel down the shaft if we have to. Then what? Eddie asked. They'll just come from somewhere else. They're hunting us, Lena said, glancing toward the boarded-up windows. It's not random anymore. They're following us specifically. Why? June asked, already wrapping gauze around her bleeding arm again. No one had an answer. That night, they sealed the hatch. Welded steel. Reinforced with iron piping, sandbags, and a firetruck's spare axle jammed into place like a crossbar. And for a few hours, there was peace. Until the signal came back. The emergency radio, long silent, suddenly crackled to life around 4 a.m. Caleb lunged for it, tuning the dial just as the voice came through again. Safe zone echo reporting. The woman's voice, distorted but steady. All refugees redirect to fallback point, repeat. Echo is gone, fallback to. Bravo site, coordinates incoming. More static. Then a burst of garbled audio. Explosions in the background. Screaming. We're not safe, they're already inside, they're not what we thought. Then silence. Dead silence. Lena stared at the radio. They're taking out the safe zones. We need a new plan, Caleb said. We need to stop running, Rooker growled. We need to hit back. But before anyone could argue, Tank leapt to his feet and snarled toward the garage bay. A low hissing sound filled the room. Then, slowly, one by one, the overhead firehouse lights began to shut off. The lights died with a final electric pop. Darkness swallowed the firehouse in an instant, the kind of darkness that suffocates sound and motion, where every breath feels louder, every heartbeat becomes a signal flare. The emergency generator hadn't kicked in. That meant sabotage, or something smarter. Caleb Morgan didn't move. He stood still, listening, eyes wide, pulse pounding in his neck. From the garage bay came a sound like wet cloth dragging across tile. Tank growled again, low and unbroken. He backed slowly toward Caleb, tail between his legs, head lowered, not ready to fight, ready to flee. "They've cut the power," Lena whispered. "How could they cut the power?" "They didn't," Rooker said flatly from the stairwell, holding a flashlight in one hand and a fire axe in the other. "They redirected it. The fuse box was tampered with. Burned out from the inside." "Inside?" Eddie asked. "You mean someone here?" "No," Rooker interrupted. "Something already inside." A metallic clang echoed through the station, followed by a sharp, scraping pop-pop-pop from the vent system. Caleb raised his flashlight and scanned the upper walls. "Check the vents. They're testing for access points. Or crawling through them," Bobby muttered, limping toward the control room to grab the flare gun they'd seen earlier. June, pale and sweating, leaned heavily on the wall. Her arm was getting worse, too pale, the skin tight, veins rising beneath the surface like they were being pulled upward. "June," Lena said softly, "you okay?" June looked at her. "I'm still me," she said flatly. "If that changes, I won't give you the chance to hesitate." "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Caleb replied without looking. Just then, a scream split the quiet. Sharp. Close. It came from the old living quarters near the back of the station. Eddie dropped the flashlight and ran without thinking. Caleb chased after him, shotgun in hand. They burst into the hallway and found the door to the laundry room wide open, flapping slightly, as if it had been thrown open and then forgotten. Inside, they found a man. But not one of theirs. He was crouched in the corner, dressed in torn hunting gear, face half-wrapped in bandages, eyes wide and frantic. He held a knife in one trembling hand, the other arm slick with what looked like drying blood. "Who the hell?" Caleb started. "I followed you," the man blurted. "I saw the trucks, saw your lights, I thought you were safe." "How did you get in?" Caleb asked sharply. "The tunnel," the man gasped. "I came through it before you sealed it, I was in there before the things showed up. I've been hiding in this place all day. I thought they were gonna find me. I saw what they did at the train yard. They don't just kill. They change people." Caleb stepped closer. "Change how?" "They take their minds," the man whispered. "They don't rot anymore. They rebuild. One guy at the depot, his head was cracked open. They stitched him back together. He started talking again, but it wasn't him. It was them, wearing his voice like a mask." Eddie's skin went cold. "You're saying they're using the bodies to think?" The man nodded, shaking. "Hive mind. Smart ones. A whole network of thinking corpses." One of them looked right at me and smiled. Caleb lowered his shotgun slightly. "What's your name?" The man took a long, shaky breath. "Travis. Travis Geller. I was with a survivor group near Casper. We held out for 2 weeks. Then something got inside. We didn't even see it coming." "Is there anyone else with you?" Rooker asked from the doorway. He had arrived silently, weapon ready. Travis shook his head. "Just me. The others didn't make it." Behind them, the lights flickered once, then stayed off. Somewhere above, another vent cover creaked. Caleb turned. "All right, listen up. We don't have the firepower for another night here. These things are adapting. Watching. Waiting. If we don't move, we die. You want to run?" Bobby asked. "No," Caleb said. "I want to lure them. Set a trap. Give them a false win, then we torch every last one." Rooker nodded slowly. "There's a fuel line under the back lot. Runs through the garage floor. We overheat the generator, rig the fuel valve, and detonate it remotely. We blow up our only shelter. Lena asked, stunned. We blow up their nest, Caleb said. We're not hiding anymore. If we're going down, we're taking them with us. A long silence followed. Then June stepped forward, still pale, still shaking, but clear-eyed. Then let's make it count. They worked through the night like a unit welded by fear and necessity, hands moving with a grim choreography learned from years of small, urgent tasks, tying, tightening, patching, and praying. Caleb and Rooker crawled beneath the gutted generator room with a wrench and a length of hose, their breath fogging in the stale air as they traced the fuel line that ran from the underground tank out to the rear lot. Lena and Bobby scavenged batteries and wiring from old radios and the firetruck's electrical box, bending them into a makeshift detonator with the stubborn ingenuity of people who had spent their lives making something out of nothing. June and Eddie stacked sandbags and lined the garage doors with scrap metal to force a single exit, a choke point where the herd would be easiest to control. Travis, still shaking but steadying, was sent to scout the perimeter, a whispered promise of a map he'd memorized in the depot's briefing room. Tank padded along at Caleb's heels like a guardian, ears alert, nose to the ground. The plan was brutally simple: bait the undead into the garage with noise and movement, lure them into the one choke point, and then collapse the back lot with a blast big enough to trap or disorient the mass long enough for the survivors to flee toward the highway and, if possible, the coordinates on the garbled radio. It was a desperate, reckless hope. That was the only kind they had. By dawn, the sky was the color of old steel. The town still smoldered like a memory, chimneys spasming thin columns of smoke into the chill air. Caleb stood on the firehouse steps with a flashlight modified as a strobe, the light threaded into the detonator's trigger. Rooker's face was a map of decisions: soldier's jaw, civilian's worry. We should time it, Rooker said softly. Half-second delay. Give everyone enough time to clear the lot. Caleb nodded. Eddie and Lena take point with the flare guns. Bobby and Travis will spark the trucks. June, you watch the back doorway and keep people moving. Rooker, you and I, he didn't finish. No words could finish what they both understood. Two men would have to stay to make sure that when push came to shove, the line held long enough. Rooker looked at him and gave the smallest of nods. They set the bait, the stolen truck Caleb had used to scout at night, its horn wired to a low-voltage buzzer that would turn into an unbearable, human-drawing shriek. Eddie fired the first soft flare, an orange pinprick that cut through dawn, and the creatures answered, materializing at the edges of the lot like gray tide. The sight of them made something inside the group shudder. These were not blind shamblers anymore. They moved with purpose, clustering, watching, as if deciding which body would carry their thought. When the horn began its rapid, mechanical wail, the herd surged like a living wave. The choke point narrowed 2 inches. Lena's hands were white on the track door lever. Bobby limped beside her, breath fogging, eyes wide with 1,000 small calculations. From the generator pit beneath the floor, Caleb felt the thrum of fuel, the precarious click of a system on the edge of combustion. He glanced at Rooker, steady as a lighthouse in the storm. Now, Caleb mouthed. Rooker answered with a short, fierce smile that did not reach his eyes. He pulled the safety pin from their crude delay and slid the trigger into place, his fingers steady despite everything. For a heartbeat, everything was perfect. The creatures flowed into the prepared lane, pressed against the temporary barricades, drawn by sound and a promise of warmth. The survivors moved in practice steps, out the side door, across the service alley, and into the line of trees where the road to Garland might still be passable. Travis ran with a small pack of supplies, his breath ragged but fast. June moved slower, helping a staggered woman who had joined them in the night. Eddie and Lena covered the rear, firing SIG alerts that blew in the weak morning like desperate fireflies. Then something went wrong. A shadow detached from the main surge, moving with unhurried precision not toward the bait but toward the generator pit itself. Caleb had no time to curse the universe. He threw himself toward the pit, hand slamming on a breaker to divert the last surge of power. Rooker shouted, a sound that was equal parts command and warning. The shadow reached the pit and paused, head cocked as if listening. And then it looked directly at Caleb. There was a terrible, almost human pause as light from the generator pit reflected off a face that should not have been capable of comprehension. It smiled. Rooker didn't hesitate. He grabbed Caleb, thrust the detonator into his friend's hand, and shoved him toward the alley. "Go," he barked. "Get them out." Caleb's fingers closed on cold metal, the delay timer ticked like a second's pulse. He wanted to argue, to stay, but Rooker shoved once more, a final, deliberate push that contained everything: trust, resignation, the knowledge of what had to be done. They ran. Behind them, the firehouse became a thunderclap. The fuel line detonated with the clean, terrible certainty of planned destruction. A wall of heat rolled outward, scorching the air, flipping the nearest undead like rag dolls and searing the pavement black. The blast wasn't perfect, it never would be. The herd scattered, some bodies flung aside, others thrown into disarray. The back lot became a furnace of smoke and light. For a breath, the survivors watched in stunned silence as their trap did exactly what it was supposed to: it bought them seconds. Seconds were all Caleb needed. He ran until his lungs burned, until the trees swallowed the town behind him, until the last pop of burning diesel muted into a low, mechanical moan from a town that would never be the same. When he turned back, the firehouse stood in a smear of smoke, its roof coughing sparks into the sky. He searched frenzied faces: Eddie, Lena, Bobby, June, Travis, each one marked by exhaustion and the thin, sharp line of grief. But Rooker was not among them. Caleb's chest tightened like a vice. He clutched the detonator and understood with a clarity that felt like a blade: someone had stayed behind. Someone had made the last decision. He thought of Rooker's steady hands, his old marine posture, the animal calm that never left. Whether Rooker had made it out or not was a question the smoke would answer in its own time. For now there was only the road ahead and a single, raw determination growing in Caleb's gut. They had bought themselves a chance. They had paid a price. They would live, because they had to. And they would carry the memory of what they had lost as a map for how to survive what came next. They left Coldridge behind them like a wound that never fully scabbed over. Ash still hung in the sky, drifting like snow across the ruined rooftops, as the firehouse continued to smolder beneath the pale morning light. Caleb Morgan didn't look back after the first mile. He knew if he did, he wouldn't be able to keep walking. The group was down to 6: Caleb, Lena, Eddie, June, Bobby, and Travis. Tank padded silently at Caleb's side, every step measured, eyes scanning the horizon like he expected another ambush. Maybe he was right. They stuck to side roads, moving quietly through the wreckage of rural America, farms picked clean, gas stations shattered, the shells of cars abandoned in the middle of the road as if their drivers had simply disappeared. The world felt emptied. Not just of people, but of presence. Like the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting to see who would blink first, the living, or the dead. Bobby's limp had worsened, and June's arm was wrapped tighter now, discoloring at the edges, despite her best efforts to hide it. She still hadn't told the others what Caleb already suspected. But he didn't press. Not yet. Lena had taken over navigating, using Travis's sketchy memory of the safe zone Bravo coordinates as a guide. They followed train lines, avoiding the cities. Travis said the cities were where the smart ones were migrating. They called them sentients now, undead that weren't just surviving, but thinking. Evolving. Building something. What kind of monsters build? Eddie had asked once, quietly. No one answered. On the third night, they made camp in a ranger station tucked inside a forest preserve. It had survived the chaos mostly untouched, except for the bloodstains in the back office and a shattered emergency radio. But the doors locked, the roof held, and for a few hours, they were safe. Caleb sat alone on the roof, shotgun beside him, watching the tree line. Tank lay nearby, ears twitching every time a branch moved. In the dark below, he could hear Eddie and Lena whispering quietly, planning fuel routes and escape scenarios. Travis had fallen into a deep sleep the moment he sat down. Bobby was silent, his leg worse than anyone admitted. And June. June climbed the ladder just after midnight. "You look like hell," she said, settling beside him. "You've seen a mirror lately?" Caleb replied with a dry half-smile. She didn't laugh. She looked out toward the woods, her expression unreadable. "I can feel it," she whispered after a moment. "Whatever this thing is, it's inside me now. Not like the stories. No fever, no convulsions. Just this, slow shift. Like I'm watching my own thoughts from behind glass." Caleb's stomach nodded, but he didn't speak. "I'm still me right now," June continued. "But soon I won't be. And when that happens, I need you to do it. Don't let it be Eddie. Or Lena. Or anyone else. You." Caleb looked at her then, really looked. "You saved Eddie. You saved all of us. That won't be forgotten." June gave him a small, tired smile. "Then let's make the rest of it count." They sat in silence until dawn. By the end of the week, they found the first real sign of Bravo site. A wrecked military checkpoint. Deserted. Vehicles gutted, weapons stripped, but stenciled across the pavement in fading white paint were two unmistakable words. Evac route. They followed the trail through foothills and along a dried riverbed, finally reaching a concealed compound hidden behind old FEMA shipping containers and a wall of steel-reinforced fencing. There were no guards at the gate, but there were sensors. Cameras. Motion detectors. When Caleb stepped forward with his hands raised, a speaker above the gate crackled. "State your name and intent." He swallowed. "Caleb Morgan. Survivors en route from Coldridge. 6 in total. 1 injured. 1, he hesitated. 1 compromised." A pause. Then. "Understood. Place weapons on the ground. Wait for medical unit." The gates opened 15 minutes later. Uniformed personnel, armed, armored, and exhausted, escorted them inside. Inside the walls was something they hadn't seen in weeks: organization. Tents, clean water, generators, solar panels. Real food. Laughter, even. Dozens of survivors moved between stations like it was still the world they remembered, albeit one with scars. They were taken to decontamination first, then separated for screening. That was the last time Caleb saw June. She went with the medical team without a word. Didn't look back. She knew, and so did he. He waited 4 days for news. On the 5th, a nurse brought him a sealed bag with June's jacket inside. Nothing else. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. Weeks passed. The group stayed together inside Bravo site. Eddie and Lena were assigned to perimeter watch. Bobby was fitted with a proper brace and helped with logistics. Travis began training with the radio crew, broadcasting warnings to any survivors still out there. Caleb? He joined the outside recon team. Volunteered without hesitation. He knew the world wasn't safe. He knew Bravo site was just another temporary firehouse, waiting to fall. But he also knew something else now. They could fight back. They weren't just prey anymore. And somewhere out there, in the ashes of towns like Coldridge, were other survivors, people who needed to know that the dead could still be resisted. That there was hope. That the story hadn't ended. End of Book 1.